Hi everybody, I'm Steve Jordan. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about glass cutting today. It's a beautiful 50-degree day in the middle of February, so we're out in my front yard. As you may know from my former videos, I have moved out of my workshop, so this is how I do it now. I guess you may wonder why I'm talking about cutting glass, because most people go to the hardware store or to the glass company or the lumber company to have their glass cut. If you need a lot of glass on a job site cut and you know it beforehand, then you can take your glass and cut it on site way more economically than to take measurements, drive to the hardware store, drive back and put it in, and then what if it doesn't fit? You have to drive back again. I don't know about you or where you live, but that's going to waste an hour for me. I've done a lot of jobs where I replaced maybe 20 pieces of glass, and taking glass, setting up a table in the yard and cutting it on site was a huge economic boost as compared to back and forth. First, just a little bit about glass. Most of the glass that we use for windows is either what we refer to as single strength or double strength glass. There's also plate glass, which I'm not going to talk about, but I want to show you these. Single strength glass is 3/32 thick. Double strength is 1/8 thick. Not to confuse you, but glass today is provided in millimeters. And old glass, depending on how old it is, doesn't really follow those norms. For example, this is a piece of 1820s crown glass. It's beautiful glass with all the indicative waviness that you'd expect of crown glass, and it's a tad bit thinner than 1/16. That's a very thin piece of glass, and it's fragile as it can be. This is a piece of, probably 100-year-old single strength glass. It's a tad thicker than the single strength that we buy today, but it's still pretty easy to cut. This is a piece of double strength glass. It's 1/8, sometimes a little bit more if it's old glass. It's stronger than the single strength, a little bit harder to cut, but not really a problem. What we're not going to deal with today is plate glass. Plate glass was very heavy glass, often used in older homes for sound deadening purposes or because it was absolutely clear, okay, without distortions. So here's a piece of 5/16 inch plate glass, okay, and we would probably replace that with 1/4 inch glass, which is 6 millimeter today, okay. These are harder to cut than ordinary sheet glass, window glass, so I'm not going to talk about them, okay. I will talk about pattern glass. So this is pattern glass, all right, you see that? I believe this is called starburst, and here's another type of pattern glass, all right. When you cut pattern glass, you can only cut it on a smooth side. There's a rough side, smooth side, rough side, smooth side. You have to cut it on the smooth side, or score it on the smooth side, okay. There are also glasses that I'm not going to talk about for stained glass purposes, like opalescent glasses, and they're very difficult to cut. You don't need a lot of fancy tools for cutting glass unless it's something you do all the time. The tools for glass cutting are not expensive, and there are not that many. Anybody can do this, okay? The first and most important tool is your glass cutter. This cutter and this cutter are both inexpensive hardware store glass cutters. This one I believe was a Red Devil, and this one is a Fletcher. They cost $5 to $10 depending on where you buy them. This one is an old tool, but they still make them, and it has several different cutters, so when one wears out, you just turn the knob and you'll have a fresh one on there. I think there's 6 different cutter heads on this one. These are professional glass cutters. These are what I use. This one's a Toyo. This one I believe was a Bloom Oak or another brand, Harden. The benefit of these is they have a swiveling head, okay, but they also have an oil reservoir, so I can take ordinary household oil. Marble mystery fluid is another oil. Put it in the reservoir, and that lubricates the cutter head, and it lubricates lubricates the glass for a clean cut. Another tool that I frequently use are these inexpensive suction cups, which you can buy on Amazon or you can get them at Harbor Freight. These are the inexpensive kinds. If you're a professional, you want the $100 version of these, but in the meantime, these are great for lifting up a piece of glass if you're replacing it in the opening. They're terrific for that. And then there's the straight edges. This is a little right angle, 1 foot straight edge for cutting small panes of glass. It didn't cost too much, and the 2 foot version of this doesn't cost too much, but as you increase them in length, from 36 inches to 40 inches to 60 inches, they get very expensive because they're a precision tool. What I like to use is this no grip 2 foot ruler. It's called No Slip Grip by Savage. This costs about $15, maybe a little more. It's got a nice handle. It's got a no slip pad on the back. It's just has been indispensable to me for cutting glass. And the last thing is a good ruler or tape measure. Once you've made your score in the glass, you have to break it off. There are 2 ways to do that, or actually there's 3 ways to do that. And I'm going to show you all 3. But one is just to break it over a table edge at the score. The other is to use running pliers, and these are running pliers where you would grab it, lay it on the table, break it off. Again, I'm going to show you that. These are Goziers or nibblers, which may or may not be useful to you, but I'm going to show you what they're good for. As an example, I'm going to use this circa 1850 window sash, and I first have to measure to see what size pane that I need. The first way we're going to do this is measure and then cut the pane separately, okay? You'll see what I mean. And it looks to me like this is about 9 inches in width and 15 inches in height. But you can't just do that, okay? This could be out of square, so I want to take another measurement over here, and again it's 15 or a little bit more. I want to take a measurement down here, and again it's 9. So 9 by 15 is pretty easy to remember. So to cut my glass, I first need a good flat surface, okay? And I have a piece of birch plywood on sawhorses out in my yard, and on top of that I've put a yoga mat. It's a foam yoga mat. It's just great for that purpose. In a shop, people will use a low pile carpet. For a quick cut, you could use a terry towel, low nap towel. And this is a great product. This is a carpet pad. It's also made for putting in tool drawers and things like that. This foam, you can roll it up, doesn't take any room. It's a great product. What's important is this be placed on a flat surface that's padded and that there's no materials under it, because if there's a little rock or something under it and I push down here as I cut it, it'll break the glass. One of the first rules of cutting glass is that it's clean, because if the glass is dirty and you're running your score, you hit a sand particle, that'll be a place where a break will occur. Now this is an old piece of glass, probably from about 1900, and so you see there's paint and putty on the edges. And since I'll be taking my score over those edges, I want to make sure that I don't cut my score over that paint or putty, okay? Anyway, I'm just showing you this, and then when I cut it, I'll do a little bit better job. Duster brush is also a good idea. So, as I said to you, it's 9 by 15. So like I said, the height and width were 9 by 15 on this piece of glass I need to cut for the window sash. And so I've measured out a 9 by 15 rectangle on this piece of glass. And I've marked it with a Sharpie marker, which is another tool I didn't mention earlier. I should also say that when you're using a Sharpie marker, if you've got a white sheet over your pad, it's a lot easier to see. That's really hard to see on this dark blue yoga mat. And it was also hard to see on my gray carpet at my shop. So I kept a white sheet over it. You can't just cut this out. I have to go all the way across. So I'm going to note where my cutter head falls on the line, okay? I don't want the cutter head to be on the outside of that line. My piece of glass will be too big. I don't want it to be too much on the inside of the line. My glass might be too little. So I'm very careful about how I do this. And so I want you to listen. This is part visual, but it's just as much an audio thing. You have to hear this score. And so let's see if you can hear it. That's the indicative sound, I hope, of a good score. Now I'm going to break this because there's a whole lot of extra or selvage here. I'm going to break this over the edge of the table. Let's see how this works, okay? Perfect. Now you can see my other line. You can see how it almost disappears on the table. And we're going to cut it. So now I'm going to score the long side of this glass pane. I'm switching now to the inexpensive cutter, the Fletcher number 024. Once again, I want to be very careful about how my cutter head falls on the line I've drawn. I should mention that some people say always pull towards you. Some people push. It really doesn't matter as long as you have good leverage. You saw it down here, I backtracked. You do not backtrack because it will ruin the cutter head. So that's the reason I said you start with a cheap tool. You learn not to backtrack. It's just counterintuitive. And once you've learned not to backtrack, then you go to the better tool. So let's see if this score is okay. Worked out well. And we'll see now if it fits. It's my Sash. Let's see if the pane fits, okay? Did you see what I've done? I think I've cut it a little long. Let me try it in the other direction, okay? On the other hand, this Sash could be out of square. All right, so I've cut it a little long. Let's see if we can remedy that. If I wanted to take a 1/4 inch off this piece of glass, it would be really easy. If I want to take a 1/16 or an 1/8 off, that's much harder, okay? Sometimes it's just easier to go to a new piece of glass. Well, let's try, see if I can do it. Make sure it's clean. All right. Here's my straight edge. Here's my cutter. Let me pull it down a little. And here goes. I sure didn't like the way that sounded when I started. Let's just see if it breaks off, okay? If that were bigger, wider, I would trust these, and we'll see if this works. You never know. Okay. I'll grab it right at that edge, and it broke. Sometimes it's just easier to go to a new piece of glass. You want to do everything you can to cut it right the first time. We'll try again. So I broke the first piece, and obviously I have to cut another piece. But instead of cutting another piece the same way, I'm going to show you the second way that we do this, okay? Just for the efficiency of time. This is another piece off of the same big pane that I cut up. I know that I have one straight edge, so I'm going to lay that straight edge right along there where I know it'll work, okay? I can do a couple things. I can draw a line along here, which I can cut along, and the second method is not to draw a line at all, but set my straight edge on here exactly where I want to make my cut and make the cut. Using my straight edge, I've placed my piece of replacement glass on here with one edge along this fillet or glazing bar, so I don't have to cut that edge. I've marked this side with the Sharpie marker, and I'm going to cut that right now. I should have knocked that off. I didn't, folks. That's a bad practice, okay? But anyway, here we go. See if that will break off. And instead of just banging it on the side of the table, this time I'm going to use my running pliers, okay? So now I have two edges that fit about the way I want to. Now I have this one. I'm not going to mark it, okay? What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to place my straight edge exactly where I want it. I'm going to be very cognizant of where my cutter head falls on here, and I'm going to cut this piece and hope it doesn't break. It
just didn't go, did it? Huh?
Yeah.
That even go?
Here. So let's see how this breaks. I didn't feel good about the score. Glass isn't really clean enough. And look what happens, see? This piece of glass has paint drips on it. It's dirty, okay? So what I'm going to try to do, turn it over, cut it on the other side. I'm going to try to salvage my piece of glass, all right? I'm not sure I scored that well enough, but let's see. Pretty good. And I'm concerned about that little piece right there. So this is a great example of when to use your Goziers. So you see I have that piece sticking out too far. Let's see if I can nip that off with my Goziers. I hope I can. I don't know. So I'm going to try to break this little nib off here that didn't break off right because my glass isn't clean enough. And you see, I got a little area sticking out here I don't like. I'm going to try to use my Goziers on that. I'm going to grab it and pull it off, okay? Down here I got a little bit more of that. I'm going to grab it and pull it off. All right? So now we have a piece of glass that fits on three sides. Is it clean enough? Maybe. I want to show you how most of us cut our glass. Okay, we get it in here, we lay it on, we don't mark it, we don't measure it, we just lay it over the light and we make the cut. And here we do it like this. And I'm getting a good sound, okay guys? All right, there. Fits. Now I have just a couple other things to show you. All right, we've cut a good piece of glass. Let's take this piece. All right, I want to show you another method. I showed you how you break the glass off on the side of the table. I showed you how you use the running pliers, okay? But there's another method which is especially helpful with thick glass. That would be plate glass or... Okay, so I've run my score. And you heard it, okay? And I'm going to take the ball end of this cheap cutter and I'm going to try to create a cleavage along that score just by tapping dead on it. And I can normally see that beginning to open up. Sometimes it will actually just, oh, look at that, it just fell off. That's another great way to cut a piece of glass when you don't know how. Another scary part of cutting glass is what if you need to cut a curve, all right? And cutting a curve is no harder than what you just saw me do. Let's try it, all right? I'm gonna draw a curve, not a very good curve, across the top of this. And I'm gonna take my cutter, again I'm dipping it in the oil here, okay? And I'm gonna try as best as I can to freehand follow this around that curve. Here we go. Oh, look what it did. Why did it do that? Let's try it again. Right here. All right. take my cutter. Now I could probably break that off by tapping it under bottom and trying to create a cleavage between the two sides. I might even be able to break that off using my running pliers, but let's say it's a great big piece and you don't want to break it. What we do is we radiate cuts out from that, okay? First, then I tap it, okay, and you see the whole thing came off, but then I cut my curve. That's how you cut a curve safely. On a big piece of glass, I would cut a lot of little radial scores to do that. So that's my tutorial on replacing glass. Cutting glass can be dangerous because the cut edges are sharp and the little pieces that come off can embed in your hand, so you want to be careful. You can use gloves that have a grip on them that makes it easier to pick the glass up, prevents it from sliding through your hands. But most important, you want eye protection. You do not want to take the chance of getting a piece of glass in your eye. I hope you learned something. See, that's how that works. WindowSashBible.com. Storm Windows, a comprehensive guide, and soon to be glazing traditional windows and replacing glass. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.